Lesson 6. Now this lesson I wanted to entitle Snakes, Snarks, and Sharks. Snakes, Snarks, and Sharks. Somebody said that that wouldn't be fair to the snakes and the sharks. We're going to talk about criticism. And Dale Carnegie talked a lot about that and how we should handle it and how we should give it or deal with it. And so I thought, let's take a few minutes to perhaps put some modern understandings and perhaps a different way of looking at how we might deal with criticism in life. Now, if you've noticed, we've tried to make this thematic that it builds. Let's say you become a person of influence. You begin to be noticed, or perhaps you have a following. Well, I can tell you this. The more you achieve, the more success you have, the greater influence you have, you will gather followers, and you will gather friends, and you will gather people who very much have good feelings about you. But you will also attract the snakes and the snarks and the sharks. That's just part of the human condition. Now there are two things that are aggravating the situation. First of all, the very source that you're using right now. The anonymity of the internet has now made it possible through the review process, the comment process, the commentary process. You know, people will say all kinds of nasty things anonymously, impersonally, because they don't have to do it face to face. They don't have to worry about somebody coming back on top of them. And so the amount of snakes and snarks and sharks who are out there who just simply want to be nasty, as someone has said, unfortunately there are people who are very, very miserable, and as a result of that they take their misery out on people who they think have less misery than they do. Just happens. Again, Dale Carnegie and those who have real wisdom know that we're dealing with a lot of things that are just simply illogical, irrational, and on occasion we will actually meet up with that sociopathic character who just simply may best be described as mean, nasty, and maybe even evil. Those things happen. Those people are there, and the more influence you have, the more friends you have, the more success you have, you will also find that there will be people like that who will come into your orbit, come into your world. So, how do we deal with that? Well, part of it is simply the acceptance of things are and seeing if we can perhaps develop what some people would call a little tougher skin about it, a little greater understanding about it, and hopefully, even though we try as best we can, it's still hard to deal with. As one of my good friends who went on to become quite successful and gave a lot of speeches and a lot of talks, simply said to me this, Stan, what is it? I'll give a talk and I'll get 100 people who will come up to me and hand me a review, and almost all of them are positive. And what do I think about? I think about the one or two that were nasty or negative. Why does that happen? Well, that's just a way a lot of us are. I mean, we're sensitive to that kind of criticism. One of my mentors, when I first began doing a number of public speaking gigs and engagements, was a woman who'd been in the business for many years, and she simply said this: you have to understand, for some strange reason, that when you address a large audience, that about 25% of the people will just love you no matter what. I mean, whatever reason. You may remind them of someone they love. You may have reminded them, who knows, that's just who they are. And then she went on to say, and unfortunately, there's probably 20 to 25% who will not like you for equally valid or invalid reasons. She says, the way you win the game is the 50% in the middle. Are you able to engage them and please them and hopefully find favor with them? But those 20 to 25%, They're just a part of the human condition, and they're part of your speaking situation. So that's how we begin to deal with it. That's how we begin to understand it. Now, I'm going to simply suggest that when you receive criticism, there's the proverbial, well, consider the source. Of course. Who is that person? Do you respect that person? Do you know that person? Do they know you? What about the source? What about the credibility of the source? And that can lead you into all kinds of explorations, but I would suggest that you make that a minimal part of your exploration. I would simply say, when you receive criticism, use the 4F question. Okay, here we go. First of all, when you receive criticism, first of all, ask yourself, well, is that factual? Is that a fact? Is it true? If someone writes in, as they just did about a video I did some time ago, and they criticized me by saying that the signal-to-noise ratio was a bit high. You know what? He was right. That is true. I went back and listened to it. He got it right. That's a fact. The signal-to-noise ratio is too high. Now, that may mean nothing to you except for the fact that there are certain things that come to us that are facts, and then we simply have to acknowledge them, perhaps thank the person for pointing that out to us, or we make some corrections or adjustments, or we just deal with it. Say, okay, there's nothing I can do about it. The fact is the fact is the fact, and there you are. Secondly, though, you can say, well, is that criticism just a feeling? Something they feel. It may not be based on fact or any particular substance to it, but everybody has feelings, and feelings are very, very important. Feelings define reality. I oftentimes tell people in counseling and coaching is that, feelings may not reflect reality, but they oftentimes reflect the reality that we feel. I mean, they are real to people who feel that way. Well, if it's feelings, then that's something else, and then perhaps we can deal with it. The other one is it's faith. Sometimes people just have different beliefs about the way things are. Faith is something that necessarily cannot be proven or given a great deal of evidence, but we have particular faith factors, whether it's a religious faith or a political faith or a character quality. People have beliefs that they believe that are important to them, and we just may differ on the faith factor. Maybe it's just faith or belief. The fourth F is, it's a fraud. It's not true. It just isn't true. Now, what do you do when something is said that just simply is not true? Well, now let's quickly move through this, and just to give you an idea, once you understand that in terms of criticism usually is one of the 4 F's, how do you respond? A fact, you simply acknowledge, and you may thank the person for pointing that out. Now, that doesn't mean that you admit that it was wrong or you were wrong, but the fact is the fact. Feelings. Now, I would be very careful about that. Commonly, you're told to say, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. Well, I would say don't say you're sorry if you really aren't. Well, those are your feelings, and I respect your feelings is far better than saying I'm sorry that you feel that way. Now, if you really do feel sorry, but I respect your feelings. And what you did then is you actually put it in front of them saying is, yep, but it is your feelings. I respect your feelings. I feel differently about it. Okay? Faith. Well, I know you believe that, or you've always thought that's the case, or that's very important to you. However, have you ever considered, or would you be open to, or could I suggest, and you are not confronting their faith, because that's silly. You are never going to argue somebody out of a strong position. The proverbial, someone who is pushed out of their position, someone who has a strong opinion, they lose the argument if it's still their position. Even though they may lose the argument, lose the debate, they're of the same opinion. One of the things I've taught people to say is this: a truth told is good, but seldom heard. A truth revealed, that means shown, is what's that? A truth revealed has greater yield. You'll get more by just revealing a truth rather than telling a truth. A truth discovered is best of all. If you can help a person discover the truth for themselves, that's best of all. Very simply, a truth imposed is no truth at all. Someone convinced against their will of the same opinion, still. If it's a fraud, I've learned this: I don't argue with people who make false statements or who tell lies. However, I don't let it go. One gentleman in broadcasting taught me this very strong one. Someone says something and I just know it's not so, or I don't believe it to be so. I just simply said, that's not true. That's not true. Now, I don't go in and argue about it. I don't defend myself. I just simply say, that's not so. That's not true. It's not meant to provoke an argument. I don't necessarily counterattack. I just simply say, that's not true, and let it go. I hope that's kind of helpful in how you might deal with the 4 kinds of criticism that you get. And again, we're talking about something that could be a long, long time of discussion and therapy and everything else. Now, when it comes to giving criticism, what do you do? Well, I have a basic mantra which says, unless you were asked, why should you? If it's your job, fine. If you have to give a performance review, if you're a professional critic, if that's what you're supposed to do is be in a critical mode, well, then you have to do it, and you have to do it in a professional and hopefully personable and a good way that is non-challenging in such a way that a person, is not humiliated, embarrassed, or defeated in public. At least in public. However, unless I am asked, I kind of back off. Now, from time to time, though, I've used what I call some coaching ideas that might be helpful. I developed this as a business performance coach, and here's what I oftentimes say. I oftentimes use this word: with your permission, I have a request. Would you be okay if I do not criticize until I have asked the permission question? And then I may say it like this: with your permission, may I make an observation about your speech or your performance or your work? And that's not meant to be judgmental in a strong way. It's just something you have noticed that maybe they're not aware of. With your permission, may I make an observation? With your permission, may I make a suggestion? Now, do you see that's a little stronger? I know you want to do better, so if you'll give me permission, may I make a recommendation? Now, particularly if I know that I'm in a good relationship and they're a person who actually is looking for improvement, I then say, hey, I know you really want to do better at that. You want to improve your performance. May I, as your friend or as a gentle coach and encourager, may I challenge you? Now, they have to say, okay, yeah, go ahead. Then they gave you permission to challenge them, and perhaps you do so. You are never in a position to give direction to another person unless that is your position in whatever legal or positional or organizational hierarchy that you have, or that they have asked for it. If they have asked for your direction, if they have asked, okay, and then you thank them profoundly for giving you permission and for listening and being what? Good. You were open to growth, to getting better, to improvement. Always close with a benediction. Always close with some good speaking, good words. Benediction is not necessarily a religious service. It means bena, good, diction, speak, with a good speaking challenge. There we go. Just a few minutes of thought about how going forward you might understand how you can deal with criticism, and then how, if you are in a position where you must do so, you do so with grace, mercy, and understanding. May it go well with you. Learn to live with it. Learn how to do it right and proper. But for the most part the world does not grow because people criticize. The world grows because people change and encourage one another. Whenever you can, do that for yourself and do that for others. All the best. We'll carry on. And by the way, this will really help you make good friends and make your mark.